So we know that Athena and Poseidon have a rivalry that dates back centuries, and by the time of the Lightning Thief, their history has grown into a long and complicated tapestry of not just feuds, but instances where they've worked together as well. They're family, so they have a difficult and convoluted relationship that we want to dive into today. So we're going to cover some of the highlights, starting with their competition to be the patron of Athens, but then we're also going to cover multiple other instances of the two coming to blows. During the early days of the gods, after the Titans had been slain, Zeus constructed a massive kingdom atop the peak of Mount Olympus, and the gods began dividing their domains. As we know, Zeus reigned over the skies, and Poseidon inherited control of the seas, but Poseidon didn't actually live in the oceans in the early days after Kronos fell. He stayed on Olympus, and the tension between the two brothers hung like a storm cloud over the palace. So eventually, Rhea suggested that Poseidon move to the depths of the oceans with the Telchines. It's here that he began to construct his own palace, and the Telchine forges became one of the most powerful metalworking facilities in the known world, since this was before Hephaestus had grown into his power as the blacksmith of the gods. The reason why this is important is because Poseidon's domain encompassed a piece of most major cities, since the most powerful Greek cities made their name based off of the seafaring commerce. Back in the day, the Greek were excellent sailors, since this is how city-states needed to communicate with one another, trade with each other, and spread news of major events over the region. Land travel was certainly common, but the Greeks knew how to navigate the ocean just as well, which meant that whenever a vessel went out to sea, Poseidon got a sacrifice in order to ensure safe passage. He had offerings coming in from all over Greece, but never had one patron city dedicated solely to him like most gods did. All gods shared space with Poseidon, and Poseidon shared space with the other gods, so he never had a realm to call his own. Therefore, he decided to approach the capital of the Greek mainland in order to make an offering, and he selected Attica as his first target. He approached the largest city in Greece, confident that his reputation as the Lord of the Seas and protector of sailors would be enough to outshine any rivals. But when he arrived, he found that Athena had the exact same idea. According to the account in the Greek God's Companion novel, Poseidon was immediately annoyed with Athena before she'd even spoken a word on the premise that she was a second-generation Olympian. He refers to her as an upstart, and according to Percy, he wanted to chase her off a cliff with his trident before Athena had even said anything. And this would be the beginning of a long-standing rivalry between the two. Athena, crafty as she was, came up with an idea to appease the city elders and suggested a contest. Each of them would create a gift for the city, and the people would judge them based on the merits, and whoever created the most valuable gift would claim the city. Pressured by the watching eye of 1,000 mortals, Poseidon conceded to Athena's idea, knowing that an outright brawl would lose favor with the people of Attica. Now, it's important to mention there's a slight disparity between the Greek God's Companion novel and the Lightning Thief regarding to how this competition actually went. In the Lightning Thief, Percy asks Annabeth why their parents hate each other so much, and Annabeth tells them the very same story, only she says that Poseidon created a saltwater spring for the people of Attica. In the Greek Gods novel, Poseidon does create a saltwater spring from the point where he emerged to meet the city elders, but it's not his actual gift to the people. The spring was created before the contest was issued. In the Greek God's Companion novel, Poseidon's gift is a herd of horses that he crafted from the crests and the waves. And we do know that whether or not it was a gift to the people, Poseidon did create horses at some point. We just don't know when exactly, since these two accounts are different. Athena, however, created a much more versatile gift by sprouting the first olive tree in Greece. Each individual olive was not much, but not only did olives grow by the thousands across the entire Greek countryside, but they had a wider variety of uses. She tells the people of Attica that the oil could be used to light lamps and torches, and that it can be used as a cleaner and as a core good to be traded. She offered them not just the olive, but the chance of becoming a trading capital of Greece, which was in direct competition with Poseidon's domain over seafaring traders. She attacked Poseidon's strongest offer by pointing out that the terrain in Attica was too hilly and rocky for horses to be useful, even if they could tow wagons and transport goods. Even though horses were certainly alluring, Athena was much more well-spoken than Poseidon, and she had made a much more compelling case to the people of Attica. So, in the end, the Greeks chose to name their capital city for Athena, which is why to this day, the capital city of Greece is called Athens. What's really important to note here is that Athena won in part based on the merits of her gift, since the olive tree is certainly a valuable commodity, but she won in conjunction with her ability to speak and debate better than Poseidon. She could articulate a better case, and this was the turning point which turned Poseidon bitter toward her, and thus began their eons-long feud. It didn't help that Poseidon had lost the city of Argos to Hera, he lost Aegina to Zeus, and was forced to split Corinth with Helios, all of which deepened his frustration with Athena. During all of this, Poseidon had built a rather infamous reputation among mortal women, since he had actually had more affairs with mortals than even Zeus did back in the olden days. On one such occasion, he was pursuing a princess by the name of Cronius, and the simple way to put it is that Cronius was not a fan of Poseidon's advances. One day, she was taking a long walk on the beach when Poseidon approached her, and she did her best to run, but given that he was the god of the seas, and she was forced to run along the beach, she didn't have many options. In the distance, however, she could see the temple of Athena, and Cronius knew that the gods had incredibly sensitive hearing when mortals used their name. This is why the characters in the Percy Jackson universe talk about names having power, and why they say that using names haphazardly is likely to draw the attention of divine beings that you otherwise would not want involved. So, in the heat of the moment, Cronius called out to Athena for aid, and Athena looked down to Olympus to see exactly what was going on. She had already pulled one over on Poseidon before, but since she won that encounter, she wasn't bitter toward him, as he was to her for the contest in Athens, but this made her angry. Being outsmarted was one thing, but terrorizing an innocent mortal was another. So she turned Coronius into the first crow and allowed her to fly away, in part to spite Poseidon, and in part to help Coronius. When Poseidon learned of Athena's interference, his feelings toward her began to brew in a much more potent sense of overt hatred rather than passive annoyance. She had embarrassed him with the olive tree, but this was a step up. In an act of direct retribution, Poseidon decided to do something specifically designed to get back at Athena. So now, we aren't talking about two gods who just don't get along. Now we're talking about two gods that are actively going out of their way to get under each other's immortal skin. Later, he began to see an attractive mortal woman by the name of Medusa. And to keep this script PG, all we'll say is that he decided to take Medusa on a date to the temple of Athena. They broke in after dark and began to get romantic, which Poseidon knew would immediately enrage Athena. And he was right. She saw what was happening at the foot of her own statue in the center of her own temple and decided right then and there to enact vengeance on Poseidon and Medusa. Since Poseidon's actions were the most hideous thing Athena had seen someone do to spite her, she decided to turn Medusa into the most hideous creature that Poseidon had ever seen. This is the origin of why Medusa is this grotesque, snake-haired monster that we know today, though the actual story of how she came to be is much more tragic than many might immediately know. Poseidon charmed her and used her as a shield to get back at Athena without suffering any direct ramifications, making Medusa the victim of the story and painting Poseidon in a new light entirely. He left Medusa high and dry, and Medusa retreated into the mountains where she lived in isolation with her two sisters, and the tale of Medusa has become a badge of honor for Athena. The story of what Athena had done that day struck fear into anyone who had dared dishonor or insult the goddess, and Poseidon did nothing to make amends with Medusa in the years that followed. Meanwhile, Zeus himself was having his own series of affairs and shortcomings, which were getting in the way of his responsibilities as the king of Olympus. Therefore, Hera was upset because he was not only neglecting his job, but he was neglecting his job to cheat on her. He was temperamental, unfaithful, and easily distracted, and in general, not a good ruler. So she got it into her head that he was unfit to keep going as the king. She concocted a plan to get Zeus usurped from his throne, but she needed help. She knew that Athena was the most gifted strategist on Olympus, and that Poseidon had a long, rough history with Zeus as well. So she wondered if she could get the two of them to play nice together. After also pulling Apollo into the plan, they agreed to run the world as a council of equals. But the underlying subtext of the entire coup was that each of these gods thought they could run the world better than Zeus, though none of them said so out loud. On the surface, they said that Olympus would be redesigned as a democracy, and so the plan that they settled on was to tie Zeus up while he slept and demand that he surrender the throne in exchange for his freedom. Their logic was that willingly giving up the throne would sully his reputation and destroy his credibility, since killing gods isn't an option. They tied Zeus up when he slept and began designing their new government while Zeus thrashed and yelled. After a few days, the sea nymph Thetis found him, and Zeus was able to convince her to get help, though she was not powerful enough to untie the magical ropes that the gods had used. She was torn since she was under Poseidon's domain, but she eventually decided that Zeus was a far more terrifying enemy than Poseidon, so she went to Briareus, the 100-handed one, for help. She smuggled him into the palace, and he was able to undo the ropes, but you might be curious as to how this factors into Poseidon's rivalry with Athena, since the two of them are working together now. You see, when Zeus got free, he was understandably furious. He tied Hera over the pit of chaos, the domain beneath Tartarus itself, until he was certain that she would never try anything as treacherous again. Apollo and Poseidon were both stripped of their godhood and sent to live in the mortal world as regular humans, plagued by hunger, fatigue, pain, and athlete's foot. Poseidon became a lowly bricklayer for King Laomedon of Troy, and was only allowed to return to godhood after he constructed a brand new wall that encircled the entire city of Troy by hand. Athena, however, by all accounts, got off easy. She had always been a smooth talker and knew exactly how to appeal to Zeus in such a way that she got off without any severe punishment. Where Poseidon was banished to the mortal world, unsure if he would ever be a god again, Athena got a slap on the wrist and continued living as a goddess. He watched her slip accountability yet again, and this only made him angrier that she had provided the rope, she had been just as involved as the rest of them, and yet she was the only one who got away scot-free. In the modern day, we know that this rivalry made its way into Percy and Annabeth during Percy's early days at camp, but over the years, we know that Percy and Annabeth have obviously put their parents' past behind them. We don't actually get very many interactions between Poseidon and Athena in the Percy Jackson books, just the council meetings where they coexist, so we're not exactly sure how Percy and Annabeth's relationship has impacted their own. We do know in Chalice of the Gods, Athena catches Percy sneaking into Mount Olympus to return the Chalice of Ganymede, and she has the opportunity to sell him out to Zeus. Instead, however, she helps him, and Annabeth suggests that Athena is finally learning just how important Percy is to her. So it seems like Athena is at least making an attempt to peacefully coexist with Poseidon. She seems more likely to extend an olive branch, so we're hopeful that we can see more interactions between the two of them going forward, so we can actually see how Annabeth and Percy's relationship has changed things between them. But that's the full story of why Athena and Poseidon don't like each other, and how the rivalry began and evolved. Is this everything, or is there something that we missed? As always, we love this series, we love talking about the series with you, so we'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Take care, friends, and we'll see you in the next one.